Welcome back. Many actions in the winter sports community have gone digital in the last few years, especially since the COVID-19 pandemic has tremendously disrupted the organizations and staging of international sports events, hence impacted the business models. For example, without no venue spectators, the traditional ticketing and hospitality programs revenue stream would no longer be viable and the on-site sponsorship activation would be heavily reduced. While the pandemic has posed global challenges to the organization of international events, it also presents an opportunity to explore ways to strengthen the current business and marketing models through innovation and technology, as well as new opportunities to engage with new audiences, using tools and digital apps that will bring new commercial opportunities. Representatives from the Infront Sports will explain their approach to make the sports closer to the public and more sustainable and profitable for the organizations. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Mrs. Megan McGuire, Head of Winter Sports at Infront Sports. Hello, Mrs. McGuire.
Hi.
Welcome. So let's start with your experience. How do you think about the pandemic has changed the sports event marketing and organization? And what do you think there's an opportunity?
I think, as you mentioned, the one thing that's been very impacted is the on-site experience for athletes, for fans, for organizers. Winter sport in general has, I think, been lucky in some ways and unlucky in other ways, just due to the timing of the pandemic. The 2019-2020 season was well underway and almost finished before we sort of hit the first series of major lockdowns. And so there were relatively few cancellations in that season. The last season, a lot of the events that were able to take place outside had a lot of logistical issues, but the events were able to take place in general without fans, with a lot of strict COVID and health protocols. But the skating events obviously take place inside, and so it was a little bit more of a challenge to make sure that the athletes were safe and being able to be treated appropriately. I think, though, that all of the international federations were able to pivot, to find creative ways to be able to continue to have as many events as possible. Speaking specifically about the ISU, the federation, I think, did a very good job. For the speed skating, they were able to create the bubble in Heronveen and with again no spectators, but a lot of behind the scenes access for the television and the broadcasters. And that one, I think, went very well. And for the World Figure Skating Championships, again, with a very strict COVID protocol, they were able to have an event that went off very well. And they were able to include footage that I think wouldn't normally be able to be broadcast, because once in the bubble, the cameramen sort of had unprecedented access, I would say. So I think, there's been a lot of challenges in terms of organization. I think everyone's really ready to get fans back into the events, but the fact that they were able to, the ISU was able to really do a lot to provide different kinds of access than they had been in the past, I think was really the advantage here.
And we know that Infront Sports is the largest winter sports commercial rights agency in the world. And possessing almost all major rights in winter sports, Infront Sports has been focusing a lot in the last years on bringing to the market standards of commercial rights operation and expanding the potential engagement and audiences of sports like figure skating worldwide. Megan, how do you see the general interest of such a large company like Infront Sport on winter sports in general and figure skating in particular?
I think we have a long history with a lot of federations. We're very proud to be their partner. We have long-term deals with the ISU, with the IHF, with FIS, in terms of with IBU as well, with the World Curling Federation. So we're very proud to be part of the winter sports family. I think it's something that it's part of Infront's history, and so it's something that we're very happy to be partnering with. I think going forward, our goal is really to find new ways. We work very well with the federations, but also with the broadcasters, finding new ways to exploit and to bring different kinds of content to people worldwide and to really grow the fan base.
And one of the trends that we have seen in the last years is OTT platforms or digital streaming as a way of expanding the access of the sports to the fans. So do you see this is also a case for figure skating?
I think the answer to that question is clearly yes. I think it depends on what kind of platform and how it's used. But I think one of the main advantages of these OTT platforms is the fact that they have how do I put it, real estate. Traditional broadcasters have maybe 1, 2, 3 channels maximum, where they are, they're trying to exploit all of their different properties, all of their different inventory, be that winter sport, be that football, be that any other kind of sport that's sort of taking place. I think, one of the general things we've seen in sport in general is that there is so much of it, and a lot of it happens at the same time. So evenings and weekends when people can attend the events. Obviously, that's sort of the interest, to have people attending the events live. But it means that for a broadcaster, if you say only have one linear channel, you have to make choices, and the choices don't always fall in the way that we would like. But I mean that that we would like, or that anyone else would like. They might take a choice to privilege figure skating one day or football another day, and that's one of the advantages of an OTT platform, is that they can take a lot of different kinds of events and broadcast them all live. I think the other advantage is that it allows us to depending on the different OTT platform, it allows people to interact a lot more. If they may not have a subscription to the linear channel, often accessing an OTT platform is a little bit less of a heavy lift than accessing a linear TV channel, where you have to get a whole package of content. So it allows us to go directly and more specifically to fans of specific sports.
And what can help sell land sport both to broadcasters and to spectators?
I think, to me, the one thing that sells sport, and this is for figure skating, but then also for sport in general, is the stories of the athletes. I think people really, really want to connect with athletes. They want to connect with their stories. They want to know the challenges that athletes go through, everything that they are doing to prepare, but also the challenges of the competitions themselves. And so the more that we can tell the stories, I think athletes now are doing a very good job of telling those stories themselves. But the more that we can partner with them and with the broadcasters to tell the stories of the individual athletes, I think that will really allow fans to connect even more with sports, whether that's figure skating or really any sport in general.
And with the pandemic impacting heavily the world of sports, there are less events and almost always with no spectators. So how can a company like Infront Sports to help your clients to like the figure skating federations and to expand their reach? Do you have any solutions?
I mean, I think we're all looking for solutions. What I think I think one of the advantages of the broadcast is that, even if the fans aren't able to attend in the venues, they still can interact with the sport. I think the other thing that the ISU have been really fantastic in doing in the past season is looking at different kinds of technologies that are able to give a different view of the sport on a broadcast. If you take, for example, the gala event from the World Figure Skating Championships, because there were no people in the event, they were able to actually have a cameraman on the ice, giving a really different perspective and a really beautiful perspective to the gala. And I think, it's something that would be harder to do if there are fans in the event, because it would disrupt the on-site experience. So I think that's one of the things that has been sort of been really innovative this year, is trying to figure out what kind of new technologies we can bring to the broadcast that will give an even better experience and a closer experience for the people who are not, unfortunately, able to attend in the event live.
Has the fact that no spectators are allowed helped influence sports when it comes to selling the rights? Is the appetite for this sport increased since the pandemic?
I would say no. I think there, and I think this is, again, not necessarily related to one specific sport, but I think having people in the venue is, we can try to bring as many new technologies and new views to sport as we can, but having people in the venue is just such a different energy. And we are so excited to have people back this season, depending obviously on the specific individual restrictions of each country. I think, as much as we would wish that it would help, I think there's actually nothing that can replace having the energy of the fans, and I think it's actually very vital to the sales of the event. I think it brings such an additional dimension to all of sport in general.
And we also have seen technology helping the broadcasting of the sport. How do you think the new technologies can be implemented in the broadcasting, like scoring systems, live scoring, information on height of the jumps or number of the spins or something, etc.?
I think that's something that we're keen to keep working with the ISU to develop. I think that it's something that brings an additional piece of understanding to the event. I think it's key for us that commentators are involved in this kind of technology, especially the additional data. For us, it's nice to know that the height of a jump or the number of spins. But I think what's really valuable is for the commentators are able to explain to the people who are watching what that actually means. Does it mean that the skater took more risk, or does it mean that the skater has more power? What does the actual data mean for the event? I think for events perhaps more like speed skating, when we're talking about speed, I think it's maybe perhaps more self-explanatory. But for figure skating specifically, I think it's one of the things that we're working with our commentary team in front. We produce the international commentary for the figure skating events. And for us, it's very important that the commentators understand what that additional technology does or allows to understand about what the skater is doing. Because for us, the technology is useful and it's interesting, but I think at the end of the day, it really needs to complement and add value to the experience that a viewer is seeing.
So we have the Olympic Games coming up just in a few months, and how this season will be different in terms of engaging audiences and selling products.
I think any Olympic season is sort of the height of the winter sports season. The athletes have spent all of their lives. They spent the last 4 years getting ready for this, and I think that the events running up to the Olympic Games are going to be absolutely essential for all of them. We've had a little bit of a season it was more complicated last season, and so it's not the usual preparation. I think this season it's going to be absolutely essential for everyone running up to the Olympics, and I think coming out of the Olympics as well. It's such a great platform to highlight stars, new faces. It brings such an attention to the sport that usually the events that come out of the Olympics are also sort of benefit from the halo effect, I guess you could say, of having that attention during the 2-week period in Beijing.
With the move to digital, we have seen many sports focusing not only on the live streaming, but also on generating extra content, like interviews, behind the scenes, exclusive content. And does that help creating the environment for selling rights? Has the portfolio of in-front sports changed in the past months? And will it change in the near future?
So again, we're working with the ISU to do as much content around the behind the scenes as possible. Obviously, access to athletes depends on the athlete themselves, a lot of different restrictions and that kind of thing. But we think it's absolutely essential to have that. As I said earlier, the one thing that we think really, really helps sell any sport is the stories. And the behind the scenes content really allows us to flesh out what that story is. Depending on the broadcaster and depending on the sport and the athlete, that content can be a bit different. So it could be short form content for social media. It could be short form content for linear broadcast that could be played along with the broadcast. It could be longer form, sort of more documentary type content. But all of that is something that I think really adds to the broadcast. It's something that we are definitely working on creating and providing to broadcasters and working with the athletes, the federations on that. We think it's very important.
Let's talk not only about figure skating, but also all winter sports. When it comes to creating digital platforms for streaming, is it better to have specific ones or go wider and have multiple sports in one same platform? How do you think about it?
Oh, it's a hard question, and I think, and it's something that that we're asking ourselves, and that our broadcasters are asking as well. There's two ways that it could be looked at. One is if the winter sports specifically don't necessarily share the same fan base. I think there are obviously people out there who are fans of winter sport in general, but there are also people who are fans specifically of figure skating, or there's fans specifically of speed skating, or there's fans specifically of biathlon, for example. And so there is some crossover, but I think there's less than we would want there to be. Obviously we want fans of winter sport to be fans of all winter sports. But so in terms of sort of creating an OTT platform, I think there is value in having more sports together. If you can create the value proposition and make that work financially. But I think in terms of targeting specific fans, I think having a specific a single sport option, I think, is also something that's very interesting.
Let's now talk about Asia. Is the market in Asia different than in other regions? Are the clients, spectators looking for different things? How do you think about it?
I mean, this is perhaps an easy answer, but I think every market is different. Even in Asia, it's hard to say that the market in China is the same as the market in Taiwan, is the same as the market in Japan, is the same as the market in Thailand. I think each sport has a local resonance that's a little bit different. And so to say, Asia is one thing is a bit painting in broad strokes, and I would say, each market is different. For us, what we see, I think, and most importantly, is that the interest in each individual sport varies greatly between the markets. Where short track might be very strong in Korea, figure skating is very, very important in Japan, for example. So it's hard to say, that Asia looks like this. I would say overall, the one trend that we do see is that there is a lot more access to smartphones than in, say, for example, Latin America or South America, and that and sort of the technological differences, I think, is more where the difference in the markets come. People have, if the more access someone has to smartphones, the more content you might want to create for a digital platform or in a vertical format, for example. Whereas if people are looking at sort of a more traditional television market, then you would go for maybe more long-form linear content. So that's, I think, the major difference.
Okay. So as for figure skating, how will you compare figure skating and its market and specific needs with other winter sports? Any suggestions on good practices that other sports are doing that can help growing this sport?
I think, again, it comes back to telling the stories of the athletes and the local stories. So for, specifically for Taiwan, finding an athlete that really can connect with an audience and having that athlete work on creating content, I think that's really, really key. I think it's something that really brings people in. Helps them understand the sport a little bit more as well, which I think is also important. And I think that's sort of that's really the specific suggestion, is having locally relevant athletes who are able to act as a platform to push fan engagement. Obviously, having a committed linear broadcaster also really helps. But I think for us, the big difference that we see from market to market, and really sort of it's sort of generally across the world, is having that local athlete who can really act as an ambassador.
Okay. Do you see figure skating moving to an OTT model in the near future?
That's a very hard question to answer. Perhaps. We would never. I would say never say never, but I think there still is a place for linear and traditional broadcast as well. So it would depend, I guess, on the specific market conditions.
Okay. So thank you very much, McGuire, and have a nice day. Thank you for your participation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.